Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhute Kimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Kauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskatyade Siddharane. So again, welcome everyone. Today we're going to read from the Bhagavad Gita. This is the 18th chapter, text number 66. Sarva Dharma Prajaja Mamekam Sharanam Braja Aham Tvang Sarva Papebhyo Mokshi Syamima Suchaha. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. Purport. The Lord has described various kinds of knowledge and processes of religion. Knowledge of the Supreme Brahman, knowledge of the Supersoul, knowledge of the different types of orders and status of social life, knowledge of the renounced order of life, knowledge of non-attachment, sense and mind control, meditation, etc. He's described in so many ways different types of religion. Now, in summarizing Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that Arjuna should give up all the processes that have been explained to him, and he should simply surrender to Krishna. That surrender will save him from all kinds of sinful reactions. The Lord personally promises to protect him. In the 7th chapter, it is said, or it was said, that only one who has become free from all sinful reactions can take to the worship of Lord Krishna. Thus one may think that unless he is free from all sinful reactions, he cannot take to the surrendering process. To such doubts, it is here said that even if one is not free from all sinful reactions, simply by the process of surrendering to Shri Krishna, he is automatically free. There is no need of strenuous effort to free oneself from sinful reactions. One should unhesitatingly accept Krishna as the supreme savior of all living entities. With faith and love, he should surrender unto him. The process of surrender to Krishna is described in the Hari Bhakti Vilas. Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya vardhana rakshisyatiti vishvaso goptrive varnam tata atma nikshepa karpanye sadvida sharanagati. According to the devotional process, one should simply accept such religious principles that will lead ultimately to the devotional service of the Lord. One may perform a particular occupational duty according to his position in the social order, but if by executing his duty, one does not come to the point of Krishna consciousness, all his activities are in vain. Anything that does not lead to the perfectional stage of Krishna consciousness should be avoided. One should be confident that in all circumstances, Krishna will protect him from all difficulties. There is no need of thinking how one should keep the body and soul together. Krishna will see to that. One should always think himself helpless and should consider Krishna the only basis for his progress in life. As soon as one seriously engages himself in devotional service to the Lord in full Krishna consciousness, at once he becomes free from all contamination, material nature. There are different processes of religion and purificatory processes, the cultivation of knowledge, meditation, in the mystic yoga system, etc. But one who surrenders unto Krishna does not have to execute so many methods. That simple surrender unto Krishna will save him from unnecessarily wasting time. One can thus make all progress at once and be free from all sinful reactions. One should be attracted by the beautiful vision of Krishna. His name is Krishna because he's all attractive. One who becomes attracted by the beautiful, all-powerful, omnipotent vision of Krishna is fortunate. There are different kinds of transcendentalists. Some of them are attached to the impersonal Brahman vision, and some of them are attracted by the supersoul feature, etc. But one who is attracted to the personal feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and above all, one who is attracted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Krishna himself, is the most perfect transcendentalist. In other words, devotional service to Krishna in full Krishna consciousness is the most confidential part of knowledge. And this is the essence of the whole Bhagavad Gita. Karma yogis, empiric philosophers, mystics, and devotees are all called transcendentalists. But one who is a pure devotee is the best of all. Particular words used here, masuchaha, don't fear, don't hesitate, don't worry, are very significant. One may be perplexed as to how one can give up all kinds of religious forms and simply surrender into Krishna, but such worry is useless. So the verse again, Sarva Dharma Brajai Jam Mamekam Sharanam Braja Angang Sarapapebhyo Mokshi Syami Masuchaha. Abandon all varieties of religion, just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. Oma Gyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Thank you again for joining us, or joining me, or us. Now, last week I talked about the verses that go after this. But we're back in this particular verse. Krishna has summarized the entire Bhagavad Gita. And he, beginning with Bhagavad Gita, verse 65, where he tells Arjuna, Manmana Bhavamat Bhakto, Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru, Mame Vaishasi Satyam Te, Prati Jani Priyosame. So this is the positive part of the Bhagavad Gita, the summary. Krishna is telling us what we should do in order to always remember him. In other words, if we want to know what the whole philosophy of Krishna consciousness is in one verse, there are many verses. But specifically for most of us who are at the stage of Vaidhi Bhakti, regulated devotional service, what our goal is, how we can improve in specifically Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is not a process of getting more money. This is not the place to try to achieve how to win friends and influence people by themselves, how to get more money, more fame, better health. Of course, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita mentions different aspects of these things. For instance, wealth. According to Bhagavad Gita, wealth is not simply paper money or any kind of simply owning land even. Wealth, according to the Bhagavad Gita, is anad bhavati bhutani arjuna anasambhava. that all living entities subsist on food grains. Therefore, according to the Vedic culture, which is more or less, when we talk about Vedic culture, we talk about reality. We're not talking about some quaint people who lived in a village 5,000 years ago or more. We're talking about practical reality that exists eternally in this material world. Namely, the most important part of our material existence is food. And if you don't believe me, then please do me a favor, fast for a few days until our next class. You can fast. And then if you're not convinced that food is important, then I'll change my understanding of our philosophy. And even if you can fast for another 2 weeks until our next class, still just try this very quick experiment, because food, although primarily is food grains, we know that Dhruva Maharaj, when he was trying to focus his mind upon Krishna, he did not only fast from food. For instance, in the first month, he only ate kapita fruit every third day. And in the second month of his progress in becoming Krishna conscious, he only ate dry leaves that fell from the trees and grass. And for the third month, every 12th day, let's see, we have 3, 6, 9, every 9th day, he only drank a little water. So that's the next stage of fasting, only drink a little water every 9th day, following Dhruva Maharaj's footsteps. Nothing else. And in the 4th month, he only took a breath of air every 12th day. Now that's austere. So also breathing is a kind of eating. People go through the process of pranayama in order to learn how to digest air, to get the prana out of air. Principally speaking, when we're eating, we're digesting the prana in the food. And how do we know if there's prana in the food? Does anyone know? Yes. Yanadas, you know when there's prana in the food?
You will get energy from eating.
I hope so, yes, that's possible. It has taste.
Uh-huh.
You'll get energy if there's prana in the food. But also you can only tell if there's prana in the food if there's a taste. For instance, if we eat an apple, if we're hungry and we eat an apple, immediately we can taste it, and it gives us energy also. Now, no digestion is taking place. We simply absorb some of the prana, and we know we absorb the prana because we tasted it. Now, Krishna gives us these examples in Bhagavad Gita that this is actual wealth, food, air, clean air. Clean air means it's prana in the air. If you live underneath a factory, you may notice that you don't feel very good or feel very well. Because in smog, in smoke, there's very little prana. My point is that Krishna in Bhagavad Gita actually gives the essence of the most valuable questions we might have. But for a materialist who's interested in collecting cars made out of metal and plastic that make all kinds of horrible noises sometimes, and emit all kinds of obnoxious smells. Bhagavad Gita is not very useful. In other words, if we want to get what's considered wealth in modern society, Bhagavad Gita may not be very inspiring. On the other hand, Krishna recognizes there is need for good food, for clean water, for fresh air, for a healthy life. But that's not the goal of life. No one in history has it made any difference whether they died healthy in a healthy state or in an unhealthy state. When you die, if you go to Yamaraj, he doesn't ask you, were you healthy when you died, or were you unhealthy when you died? Health is important in order to progress in spiritual life. Health becomes an impediment for spiritual life if it's utilized for sense gratification. It's a disadvantage. Better to be weak and unhealthy and not engage in sinful activities because of that, rather than be strong and healthy and be inspired for sinful activities. Therefore, being unhealthy is not an impediment for spiritual life. Often it's an impetus, it's an inspiration for spiritual life. But if we're healthy, then we should utilize that life for Krishna service, and that will be an asset, the health. Now, in the 65th verse of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna dwells explicitly on one verse from the Padma Purana, which summarizes what Krishna wants us to do in a positive way. Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyajim nam namaskuru mame vaishyasi satyam te pratijani priyosame. First of all, he says, always think of me. That's all we have to do. But think of him how? In such a way as that we're his devotee. So he wants us to think about him in such a way as we become his devotee. Devotee automatically thinks about Krishna all the time. Or the more devoted we become to Krishna, then naturally we'll think about him. And if we think about Krishna, then there's yaji, then there's some service. For instance, if you fall in love with a man or a woman, then no one has to tell you have to think about them if you're actually in love with them, whatever that means. Naturally, you'll think about them. And if you become their devotee, it'll be manifested in service. That no one can claim, I'm in love with someone, but I refuse to do anything for them. If you're married and your wife tells you to take out the garbage, or the husband tells you to cook dinner, you say, I'm sorry, I'm too much in love with you. I can't do this right now. Please come back tomorrow. Maybe my love will diminish. Now, love also means service. So Krishna says, yaji, worship meaning service. And then the result of actual service to Krishna means that Krishna reveals himself to the devotee. And then namaskaru. When one experiences the pleasure and the wonder to behold the most unlimitedly beautiful, a person who's unlimitedly beautiful and wealthy, kind, etc., unlimitedly loving, then naturally one will feel a little humble. So this is the positive side. And the Padma Purana in the Nectar of Devotion, through Rupa Goswami, summarizes the verse as smartavyak sadatam vishnur vismartak dhatu na kinchit. Sarva vidi nispedyasyur etiyor eva kinkara. That the essence of the, I believe there's 1 billion or 10 billion verses in the Vedic literature which are current, is smartavya sadatam Vishnu. Always remember Krishna. And vismartak dhatu na kinchit. Never forget him. Simple, isn't it? We don't have to memorize millions of verses. We just have to always remember Krishna and never forget him. This is the essence of all the vidis, all the things we're supposed to do, and all the nishedhyas we're not supposed to do. Now, Krishna could have ended the Bhagavad Gita there, but Krishna is a little practical, and therefore in the next verse he says, Karva dharma prityaja mamekam sharanam braja. Aham hang sarvapapevyo mokshisyami masuchaha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender to me. Now, when Krishna uses the word religion, he's not talking about a particular denomination of religion. He's talking about dharma. Dharma means basically our dharma is what we focus our mind on and give our energy towards. Now, most people, they don't follow any dharma. So when they hear this verse, when they hear abandon all varieties of religion, they think, well, I've already done that. I don't follow any religion whatsoever. But that's not exactly what Krishna is referring to. Krishna is referring to human beings who actually follow some dharma, some actual religion, some kind of Vedic instruction. Now, for those who don't follow what Krishna is talking about, this is not what Bhagavad Gita is meant for. Those who are on the animal platform, they think my religion is to not be religious, to follow my senses, whatever they dictate. Well, yes, they've definitely already abandoned all varieties of religion. They become on the level of animal. But others may be following religious principles, such as karma yoga, doing dutiful activities according to the scripture. Like, for instance, in modern society, people have abandoned the religious principle of marriage. They think, why should I be restricted by one man or one woman, or even whole varieties of men and women, whatever the culture may be? Why don't, if I feel like it, I just do it? Because they have no understanding that the purpose of life is liberation from the material concept of life. They think the purpose of life is just to satisfy the senses, which unfortunately never become satisfied, and cause so much anxiety and confusion by trying to satisfy them. But for those who follow some religious principle, as Prabhupada outlines in the purport, such as even sense and mind control, or some other thing like Brahman realization, knowledge of the Supreme Brahman, knowledge of the Super Soul, etc. So religion generally has two aspects. One of them is doing something with our physical body. And the aim of doing things with our physical body, according to Vedic culture, is to elevate our consciousness. So, for instance, those who are Shudras, who have a tendency for sense gratification and the resulting confusion, anxiety over it, they're suggested that they serve those who are higher than them in the culture. for instance, the Vaishyas, who understand that unrestricted sense gratification is not very auspicious, and therefore we should work in such a way that by making life simple, we can get the necessary food. Getting airplanes, especially the type we have in our civilization, cars, computers, televisions, video games, etc. This is not what human life is meant for. Life is not a big video game that we're supposed to be playing. Life is meant for having a healthy body and healthy relationships with others. And for that, simple living doesn't mean foolish living. It means fresh air, healthy food, healthy water, healthy relationships based on love and appreciation and acceptance. Therefore, when the lower class, those who are absorbed in ignorance, they serve higher personalities, then they naturally eat better, they breathe better, they feel better, they have they learn how to have nicer relations with others, with all living entities. And that's called progress. According to Vedic culture, progress doesn't mean becoming more greedy, more envious, more lusty, more bewildered, more foolish. So Krishna has described these different processes for elevation. But we're in Kali Yuga, life is not very long, and therefore Krishna speaks Bhagavad Gita. He tells us about these different processes, but he also says that if you follow my instructions, especially the instructions given by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then naturally you'll eat better, you'll sleep better, you'll have nicer relations with others, you'll understand everything better, whether Brahman or Paramatma or Bhagavan. These things will all be revealed to you. So rather than take a path that may take millions of years to accomplish, and then finally you realize that I should always be thinking of Krishna, never forgetting him. Krishna says at the end of Bhagavad Gita, for those who are a little bit more intelligent, why don't you always think of me and never forget me? And at the same time, follow my instructions. If we follow Krishna's instructions, which means Vedic culture, then naturally we'll eat properly, we'll sleep properly, we'll have proper relations with others. All that's included. Because within Krishna, all these things are obtained also, are existing. Krishna doesn't go, there's no example of Krishna going to McDonald's and having a hamburger. Krishna is protecting the cows. There's no example of Krishna himself ever killing a cow and eating it. So naturally, if we think about Krishna and feel loving ecstasy towards him and his devotees, naturally we'll do what they're doing. And in Goloka Vrindavan and in the Vedic culture, they protect the cows. So we'll do that also naturally without having to figure out why we're doing it. But it'll be revealed to us. We'll understand perfectly well why we're doing these things. Because the example of Krishna and his devotees, when properly applied, are perfect for whatever situation we're under. Therefore, we're given not only Bhagavad Gita, but we're given Srimad Bhagavatam if there is any question of how we should act while we're in the material world and trying to think about Krishna. and never forget him. Now, Prabhupada mentions here something about sinful reactions. Now, in modern society, people don't believe there's such a thing as sin. They think that the only sin is if you're poor. If you don't have money, then you're sinful. If you're living a simple life, you must be foolish because you're missing out on all the great opportunities for happiness that the modern world gives one. And therefore, anyone who's not engaged in trying to get money, unlimited amounts of it, must be sinful to some degree, because they don't know what the goal of life is, according to modern experts, so-called experts. But according to Bhagavad Gita, happiness is natural for everyone. We don't have to get something to become happy. We have to become something to become happy. We have to become back to our original consciousness. Now, because people are trying to get something to become happy, therefore, they've completely lost what real happiness is, which is actually based upon love. And love is not based upon trying to get something. It's based upon trying to give something. Therefore, if we're so much interested in getting something for our personal selves, except for Krishna consciousness, of course, we could try to become Krishna conscious. That's getting the most valuable thing. But if we want some material thing for ourselves and think that's going to make us happy, that's not the way the material world works. As a matter of fact, when we're hankering for something in the material world, we're in great distress. And when we lose and inevitably, whatever we get, time will take it away from us, either today or tomorrow or the next day. And therefore, whatever happiness we got from possessing something, which for the most part is simply the alleviation of the fact that we don't have to hanker for it anymore because we've gotten it. But then when we get it and we try to enjoy it, after some time, it becomes distasteful, and therefore we want to get rid of it. So now we're in anxiety how to get rid of it. Or if we still like it, and if it's taken away from us, then we lament. And that's even more suffering. If we never had something and we're not hankering for it, then there's no pain for not having it. For instance, modern society is inventing things for people to hanker after, to cause them as much distress as possible. Of course, the more subtle they make the distress, the more effective they are. For instance, if someone does it 50 years ago, no one had an iPhone. Is there anyone in distress because they didn't have an iPhone? Did people cry on their pillow at night, wondering when the iPhone would be invented and they could satisfy that important desire for an iPhone? But then by inventing something so that people can communicate more effectively, now there's something desirable. Now, of course, for the most part, because society has been made very complicated, there's some advantage of having an iPhone. But if the iPhone is not utilized in Krishna service, then there's really no advantage for it. in one sense. In the sense that people have lived for millions of years or billions of years without an iPhone. And even in modern society, it is possible to live without an iPhone. One can get a simpler phone, or one can simply call on a telephone or borrow someone's phone. There's ways of getting around that, having an iPhone. But they've made it so important to have an iPhone that people feel there's part of the heart that's void. There's a hole in their heart that no apparition could fill. To such an extent that due to the propaganda, the shape of the phone, the advertisement, the happy people who possess iPhones in the advertisements, the testimonies, the display of the unlimited things you can do for an iPhone, then people become so much bewildered by it that, as I mentioned, there is one boy in China some years ago. He was so much hankering for an iPhone but he didn't have the money for it, unfortunately. So he sold one of his kidneys in order to get the iPhone. So his mother noticed he had some problems. So she discovered he sold his kidney, but he got enough money by selling his kidney, he could also get an iPad. So it wasn't so bad. But his mother was quite shocked to find out that he was going to sell his other kidney to get a computer. So this is a little bit of mistaken values or priorities in life. Because people are not taught what the goal of life is, therefore they have very insignificant goals of life. And modern society, from the beginning of birth to elementary education to higher education, is meant to make people convinced about things that are insignificant in terms of spiritual health as being the most important goal of their lives. Something to work like an ass for throughout one's entire existence. To go into debt, to go through all kinds of traumatic experiences to get things which are considered ultimately from the spiritual point of view completely insignificant for fulfilling the mission of life, namely to realize our actual spiritual identity and to relate to others in a spiritual way also. Therefore, Krishna suggests that we go through a process of remembering him. And then he suggests that while we're doing that, we gradually, anukulyasya sankalpe pratikulyasya varjana. When we discover how nice Krishna consciousness is, then we give up the activities which we've been conditioned by. So there's room to make Krishna consciousness nicer. If you have 50 cents in your hand and there's a 500 euro note on the ground and your hand is full of coins, 50-cent coins, then you have to make a choice. Either I put the coins down or I pick up the note. Now we think these are my coins. They've been in my family for at least 10 years. They're really beautiful coins. Why should I put these down just for 500 euros? So one has to become convinced that actually, if I want the 500 euros, which includes all the 50-cent coins in my hand, then I have to put the 50-cent coins down, get the 500 euros. Similarly, if we want a higher taste in Krishna consciousness, we have to examine what's making us forget Krishna. what are the obstacles for my always remembering Krishna and never forgetting him? Now, of course, Srila Rupa Goswami has not suggested that we give up all our material activities, but we make our activities spiritual. So, anukulyasya sankalpe pratikulyasya varjanam. Things that are impediments for our spiritual advancement are not necessarily what we might think they are. Because he's advised that we could also utilize things in Krishna's service, and then they're no longer be considered material. Nibandas Krishna Sambandhe Yukta Vairagyam Uchate. That we can utilize, for instance, cars in Krishna's service to drive, to get bhoga for Krishna, for the deities, to go to programs. So this car is no longer material, it becomes spiritual. But for most of us, we don't need a Rolls Royce to drive to the market to pick up bhoga. In other words, yukta vairagya means what's actually necessary. We'll probably give the example of salt to taste. Now, if you know salt, if you have experience of salt, if you have too much of it, it's not possible to eat the food. If you put too much salt on food, it becomes distasteful. And if you put too little salt in the food, there's no taste. So salt to taste means to put on just the amount of salt necessary to make the food taste flavorful. In the same way, we utilize things in this material world in Krishna's service according to what's necessary. Because what's necessary for one person may vary according to their different factors, may not be necessary for another person. As I already said, or Prabhupada used to say, if you're an elephant, then you should eat like an elephant. And if you're an ant, you should eat like an ant. But if you're an ant and you try to eat like an elephant, you'll have some problems. And if you're an elephant also, and you try to eat like an ant, you'll also encounter some problems. Therefore, we don't have to, during prasadam, for instance, it is advised we don't determine how much prasadam we eat according to how much everyone else is eating. Luckily, or fortunately, not everyone has the same material body. Therefore, everyone's type of food and amount of food and order of eating food may vary. But we should figure out what's appropriate for us. Therefore, Krishna, if we take to the process of Krishna consciousness and we inquire from Krishna and from his devotees how to live in this material world appropriately so that we can always remember him and never forget him, that will be very favorable for our advancement in devotional service and becoming conscious of Krishna. So this is Krishna's suggestion here in this verse, that we don't have to worry if we try to think about how to utilize things in Krishna's service appropriately, and we try to come to the platform by doing so of always remembering Krishna so we can never forget him, that we're not going to miss anything. If we don't see Avatar 2, our Krishna consciousness will still go on. Although there's a movie called Avatar. And of course, some devotees have seen it because it must be a spiritual movie, because it has a spiritual name, Avatar. And then they came out with Avatar 2, but if we missed that one, there's no loss. Instead, we should see the real avatar in our heart, namely the Krishna avatar, not some false avatar. So we have to become convinced about that if I become conscious of Krishna, then I won't have to worry about so many other news that's going on, so many other ideas that are floating around, etc. But that being said, there are many good things to be in modern society that can be utilized in Krishna service to spread Krishna consciousness. And if we do that, then the end result is that our lives will become simpler and everyone else's life will become simpler, ideally. And that way in future society, we won't need all this technology and chemistry and all these other so-called sciences, because they'll be seen as not important, not useful, not important to be utilized in Krishna service. That if we reach the goal, becoming Krishna conscious, then naturally the happiness and the understanding of how to live properly in this world will automatically be there by Krishna's mercy. In any case, in this particular verse, Krishna is explaining the process. And if we take to it, then Krishna should reveal himself to us eventually. And the result of that, what's desirable, is that we should actually experience that Krishna can protect us. That we don't need so much money, we don't need so much paraphernalia to be protected. Krishna will make all those arrangements. Now, we have to be careful that we don't imitate devotees on higher levels and show the world that Krishna will protect us, and we walk out into the street with our eyes closed in busy traffic, chanting our rounds, thinking that Krishna will protect me. And if a speeding car hits us, then we lose all faith in Krishna. You said that if I always think of you, then you'll protect me. So Krishna consciousness doesn't work. Krishna lied to us in Bhagavad Gita. I chanted my rounds faithfully, closing my eyes, relying upon Krishna, and he disappointed me. No, actually, Krishna also wants to give us intelligence, how to live intelligently in this world, because his body is not our body, it's Krishna's body. And therefore, Krishna has the intelligence how to properly utilize this body the best we can without unnecessarily causing this body trouble. Therefore, we should take the intelligence available to us and not, according to our level, not imitate devotees on a higher level. Indeed, a devotee on a higher level, for instance, Murari Gupta, he chanted Hare Krishna, and he could go into the forest and find tigers and slap their faces. And the tigers would purr. They purr. He could find venomous snakes on the ground, put them on his lap and play with them. Now, Srimad Bhagavatam is full of examples of devotees. And if we think, well, I'm also a devotee, why? So let me go out and show everyone how much a devotee I am. Now, it's difficult to find tigers in most of our areas, but let me go into the zoo, and when no one's looking, I'll enter into the cage and slap the tiger's face and see if it purrs or not. And if I survive that one, let me go to the place where they have venomous snakes and play with the venomous snakes on my lap. Now, if our power of Krishna consciousness doesn't create the atmosphere by which even the tigers and the snakes are in ecstasy, then the result is we'll learn very fast not to imitate higher devotees. But that's not suggested. There are easier ways to learn that. Therefore, there's Rakshisha Titi Vishwas, so that Krishna will protect us and Krishna will maintain us. This we have to be intelligently to see how much we're going to rely upon Krishna. For instance, if we go out into the street to distribute books or in Harinam, or even to do our service, we should have some faith Krishna will protect us. Now, I know devotees who became so paranoid, thinking that everyone hates the Hare Krishna movement. Therefore, let me hide myself. So even to go around the corner to the store, they put on pants and a shirt and sometimes even a wig so that people wouldn't recognize them as being part of that dangerous cult called the Hare Krishna movement. But this is actually unnecessary. Most people actually, at least from my experience, is most people actually like monks nowadays. They appreciate them. So we have to be a little bit careful. Otherwise, if we're so much doubting, as I pointed out, Krishna can protect me, that I've actually developed a phobia over doing anything devotional. As I mentioned before, I knew of one devotee who would never go on book distribution because he was always afraid that someone would attack him. So didn't matter what happened or who tried to influence him. Even if you pushed him out of the door, and he'd come back right in. So this went on for a couple of years, refusing to go on book distribution because he thought someone would attack him. Finally, one day he found himself in circumstances where he had no choice but to be on book distribution. So the first person in his life he ever went up to try to distribute a book, took their fist and smashed him into the face and knocked him out. So after 2 years of meditating on the fact that he would be attacked, it would have been quite a disappointment for him not to be attacked. This whole 2 years of meditating on how he'd be attacked would have been wasted. So Krishna didn't disappoint him. In order to fulfill his meditation, his intense desire, Krishna, the first person he sent, fulfilled his expectation and knocked him out. So he wouldn't have to be bothered again to go on book distribution. So we have to be a little careful and examine our motivations and our understandings of reality so that we don't invent our own reality that we force Krishna to fulfill for us. So within reason, we have to depend upon Krishna for our normal devotional service. After all, we're a revolutionary movement. We're not a violent revolutionary movement. We're trying to give people love of God, which is quite a revolution. So we have to be prepared to trust Krishna to some degree. And if we do that, then Krishna will show he's trustworthy. That he will not only protect us, he'll also maintain us. There used to be a philosophy in our society that if we simply go out and distribute books, then Krishna will provide everything else we need. And after some time that changed to if we simply get everything we need, then one day we'll be able to go out and distribute books. So depending upon what our faith is, Krishna will reciprocate with us. This takes some intelligence. We cannot reverse everything overnight. We have to do things intelligently, but we have to do the right things with intelligence, and then we'll get the right experience, the right understanding, and ultimately the right experience in Krishna consciousness. So this is something that Krishna is suggesting here in this verse, and he'll expand it in the later verses. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Any questions? Yes. Arduna Saka.
Hare Krishna, dear Guru Maharaji. Thank you very much for the lecture. Did I understand correctly? I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions, which means I shall deliver you from karma and influence of the planets.
Значит ли то, что я сказала, что Кришна говорит, пробуй выключить?
Okay, well, Prahlad Maharaj said that he's not under Rahu, he's under the Krishna planet. So we're under the Krishna planet, then Krishna will make the arrangements. What those arrangements are may not be exactly what we expect. Generally speaking, people think that if I'm not under the planets anymore, I'll get all the good results in the material world and avoid all the bad ones. I'll live a perfectly peaceful, happy life, and even I'll never die because I'm not under the planets anymore. No, it doesn't mean necessarily that life will become perfect, according to our estimation. It means Krishna will arrange everything in such a way as to help us, inspire us, that we're in a distressful position, that we'll remember Krishna more intently. And when we're in a happy position, a pleasant position, we'll become more enthusiastic about using that opportunity to serve Krishna with even more enthusiasm, rather than becoming complacent. So, in other words, leaving everything up to Krishna and let Krishna utilize our body, our mind, and our words as his instrument, whatever that might bring. And understanding what will ultimately will bring more Krishna consciousness if we surrender to Krishna. The difference is, for instance, if we're going to eat prasadam, it's the same prasadam with the same tongue. But when we become purified, then we don't have a glove on our tongue anymore. Material life means to put a glove on your tongue and try to taste prasadam. Spiritual life means eating prasadam, but without the tongue, that's all, without the glove. The purification, which is our goal, by becoming conscious of Krishna. When we become conscious of Krishna, then there's no more coverings over our spiritual senses. We're simply in ecstasy in association with Krishna. And therefore there's no more impediment to actually experiencing things as they actually are in Krishna consciousness. What we're eating may not be different, but our experience will be different, that's all. Kyanadas?
Hare Krishna Gurudev. I remember you saying that if one is a snake, then we should not approach that person, or we should not, either we should not flee, but we should just wait till it passes by.
Well, I don't know about a person.
But the snake. But I was
snake.
just in a place, in a farm, and it was full of snakes. All the time I was seeing so smaller and bigger snakes. So I'm just wondering that should change the place or try to live there.
Depending if the snakes are venomous, it's probably a good idea to find a more peaceful place to execute devotional service, at least at our level. But the example is given for the mind that if the thoughts flowing from our minds, which are not Krishna conscious, then neither we should grab them and meditate on them, nor should we flee from them in disgust. We should simply let them come and go. And therefore, instead of becoming anxious over those thoughts, try to change them to thinking about Krishna. That's all. It's not a scientific explanation of how to live with snakes. Let's see, there's a question here. Hare Krishna, you said that love is not based on trying to get, but trying to give. Not to save oneself from burning out, trying to give, as it often takes the form of extreme renunciation. No. Give means we give to our service to Krishna and to his representatives. Some part of that is also we take their instructions. And one of the instructions, for instance, is Dadati Pratigarinati. We not only accept prasadam, we not only give prasadam, but we also accept prasadam, but we give our love to Krishna while we're eating the prasadam. Whatever we do, we do under Krishna's directions to give our love to Krishna. So that's the important part. We're not this body, so we act as an instrument for Krishna. That's giving to Krishna our service. Even eating prasadam is also service to Krishna, or giving to Krishna. So this giving means to give to Krishna. He's the person, we water the root of the tree, and then all the leaves and branches are also satisfied. So even when we think we're not getting anything. We're simply getting Krishna's service, that's all. We're simply getting an opportunity to give Krishna something. Is that clear? Whoever wrote it. It says iPhone.
Thank you. Thank you, it's clear. Thanks. Natasha.
I thought you were called Natasha.
Yeah. It's me.
Natalie.
It's
Okay,
me.
good. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. All right. I think we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande. Haribol.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Кришна,
Thank you,
Гуру
Guru
дорогие
Maharaj.
преданные, многословные. Спасибо за лекцию.
Thank you for the lecture.